Most people who end up in dangerous situations don't walk into them. They're guided, carefully, patiently, one small step at a time by someone who has done this before and knows exactly how it works. The first meeting is always perfect. That's not an accident. That's the point. You're supposed to leave that first night thinking you finally found someone who gets it. Someone real. Someone different from everyone before. And then the second time, something shifts. Something small. Something you almost explain away. Almost. Tonight, 3 people share what happened when the person they thought they knew showed them who they actually were. Not all at once. Just enough. I'm Mr. Nightmare Files. Let's get into it. I was 31 when I started using dating apps seriously for the first time. I want to give you that context because it matters. I wasn't 22 and navigating something new. I was a grown woman with a career and a lease in my own name and a decade of adult experience behind me. I knew people. I understood social dynamics. I was not naive. I say all of that because what happened to me can happen to anyone. And the women who are most at risk of dismissing that fact are the ones who think it can't happen to them because they're smart enough to see it coming. I was smart enough. I still almost didn't see it. His name on the app was Daniel Hartwell. His profile was straightforward. No shirtless mirror photos, no vague one-line bio, no pictures taken exclusively from an angle that obscures something. A real face, clear eyes, a genuine-looking smile. He listed his profession as a project manager for a civil engineering firm. He was 34. He lived in the same city as me, same general area of town. We matched on a Wednesday. He messaged first, not with hey or a generic compliment about my photos. He asked a question about something specific in my bio. I mentioned that I'd spent a summer in coastal Maine as a kid, and that it had permanently ruined all other coastlines for me. He asked which part of the coast and why I thought it hadn't been ruined for him yet. We went back and forth for 3 days. Actual conversation, the kind you don't expect from an app. He was funny without performing humor. He was curious without being interrogative. He asked follow-up questions, which sounds like a small thing but is genuinely rare. He remembered what I said 2 messages back and referenced it. By Saturday, I was looking forward to his messages in a way I hadn't felt in a while. We agreed to meet the following Thursday, a wine bar in the neighborhood we'd both mentioned knowing. Early evening, low pressure, the kind of place that's busy enough that you're not isolated but quiet enough to actually talk. I got there first. He arrived 2 minutes later. Here is what I noticed in the first 60 seconds. He was exactly his photos. Not better, not worse, not suspiciously different. He walked in, found me immediately, and smiled like he was genuinely glad to see me. Not performing gladness, actually experiencing it, or something that looked completely indistinguishable from it. He asked what I was drinking before he sat down. Not what do you want to drink, but what are you drinking? As if he was curious about my choice rather than offering to make one for me. Small thing, nice thing. We sat for 3 hours. I don't say that to communicate that it flew by. I say it because I remember being aware of the time passing and not caring. He was the kind of person who made you feel like what you were saying mattered. He leaned in when I talked. He didn't check his phone once. He had opinions that he held clearly without needing you to agree with them. And he was genuinely interested in yours when they differed. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car. He said he'd had a great time and asked if I wanted to do it again. Not in a pressuring way, in a way that left the door open without forcing anything through it. I said yes. He texted me when he got home. 2 sentences. Said he'd been thinking about something I'd mentioned about my grandmother and had looked it up and sent a link. A small article about the coastal town she'd grown up in. I sat in my apartment that night and thought that this was what it was supposed to feel. That thought, in retrospect, should have made me more careful, not less. We texted every day that week, not constantly, not the suffocating wall-to-wall contact that sometimes signals anxiety or possession in disguise. Just present, consistent, the kind of communication that builds something without demanding it. The second date was his suggestion. Dinner this time, a restaurant I'd mentioned in passing once and hadn't thought he'd remembered. He'd remembered. He'd made a reservation. That was the first thing, not a red flag on its own. Thoughtful, actually. But I noted it. I'd mentioned that restaurant once, in the middle of a longer conversation about something else, 2 weeks prior. He had retained it and acted on it without mentioning it. The specificity of the attention was the thing. It sat somewhere at the edge of my awareness, and I filed it without fully examining it. We met at the restaurant on a Friday. The first hour was the same as the wine bar. Easy, warm, the conversation picking up exactly where we'd left it. The food was good. He'd chosen well. Then somewhere around the second drink, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could have named in the moment. He started asking different questions. Not bad questions. Not alarming questions. Just a subtle change in the direction of the conversation. Instead of questions that opened things up, the questions started narrowing down. He asked if I lived alone. I said yes. He asked about my building, what floor, what the security was like. I answered briefly and redirected. He came back to it differently, asking about the neighborhood, whether I felt safe there, whether I'd had any issues. I said no and changed the subject. He let me. And then 30 minutes later, from a completely different angle, asked if I had close friends nearby. The kind of friends I'd call if something happened. The kind who'd notice if I went quiet. I remember sitting with that question for a second before answering. Who would notice if I went quiet? I gave a general answer. Said I had a close friend 2 blocks away and a sister who checked in regularly. Both were true. I said it in a way that made both of them sound very present in my life. Also true. He nodded and moved on. At the end of dinner, he suggested a walk. The neighborhood was nice. It was a good night for it. Seemed natural. I said I was actually pretty tired and was going to head home. His face did something. I don't know how to describe it except to say that for about 2 seconds, something moved behind his expression that wasn't the face he'd been showing me all night. It was brief. It was controlled. He recovered into a normal, easy, no problem, of course, response within those same 2 seconds. But I saw it. I said goodnight. He walked me to my car, hugged me, said he'd text. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and sat in my car. I went back through the dinner in my mind. The questions about where I lived, the floor, the security, the layout, the friends who would notice, the specific narrowing nature of the inquiry, dressed in the language of interest and concern. And I thought about the restaurant I'd mentioned once, weeks ago, in passing. I went home and called my friend Jess, told her everything. She asked if I thought I was overreacting. I said I didn't know. She said, "Do you feel safe?" I thought about the 2 seconds behind his face at the end of the night. I said, "I'm not sure." She said that was enough. The next day, I did something that felt uncomfortable and necessary. I sent his full name, his employer, and every detail I had to Jess and to my sister, with instructions to keep it somewhere accessible. I also paid for a background service and ran his name. Daniel Hartwell, project manager, came back clean, which should have been reassuring. It wasn't, because something else came back too. A civil court record. A restraining order filed 4 years prior by a woman in the same city. The filing was public record, but the details were sealed. I didn't go on a third date. I sent him a brief text saying I didn't feel a connection and wished him well. He responded immediately. Not with anger, not with pressure, with warmth. Totally fine, he understood he'd had a great time getting to know me and hoped I found what I was looking for. The response was perfect. That was the thing that confirmed it for me more than anything else. The response was too perfect. It was the response of someone who had received this message before and knew exactly the right way to answer it. Not to argue. Not to push. Just to close cleanly and move on to the next one. I reported what I'd found to the police non-emergency line. Filed a written account. Gave them his name, the app, the dates, the questions he'd asked. They thanked me and said they'd make a note. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know how many first dates felt perfect before mine. I don't know how many second dates there were, or what happened on the ones where the woman didn't pull over 3 blocks away and call her friend. I think about those women sometimes. I think about the 2 seconds behind his face, and I think about how close I came to explaining it away. This happened to my friend, and she asked me to tell it because she still can't talk about it without her hands shaking. She's given me permission to share everything. I'm going to call her Nina. Nina met a man named Carter at a work conference in Chicago. She was there for 3 days representing her company at an industry event. He was attending from a different firm. They ended up at the same table at a networking dinner the first night and talked for 4 hours. He was charismatic in a specific way that Nina described as not flashy. He wasn't the person commanding the room. He was the person fully focused on you, which is more effective and more rare. They exchanged numbers before the night ended. Over the following 2 weeks, they texted daily and talked on the phone twice. Long calls, the kind that go past midnight without either person noticing the time. Nina told me she hadn't felt that kind of immediate connection with someone in years. She was careful by nature, slow to trust, and she found herself overriding that caution in a way that felt earned rather than reckless. Carter lived in a different city, about 4 hours away by car. He suggested driving down to see her the following weekend. She said yes. He arrived Saturday afternoon. They went to lunch, walked around her neighborhood, went to dinner. Nina said the entire day felt like a continuation of the phone calls. Natural, easy. The kind of day where you forget you've only known someone for 3 weeks. At the end of the night, she walked him to his car. He said he'd had an incredible time. Asked if she'd be open to him coming back the following weekend too. She said she'd like that. He drove home that night. Texted her when he arrived to say the drive was fine, and he was already looking forward to the next visit. That was the first date. The following Thursday, 4 days before Carter was scheduled to come back, Nina got home from work around 7 and found something on her front doorstep. A small plant, potted, healthy, a card tucked into the soil. The card said, "Saw this and thought of you. See you Saturday." Nina stood on her doorstep holding that card for a long time. Carter was 4 hours away. He had not mentioned sending anything. There had been no delivery notification. The plant had no shipping label, no florist tag, no indication it had come through any service. Someone had placed it there in person. She called Carter. He answered immediately and sounded genuinely confused when she described it. Said it wasn't from him. Said he hadn't been in the city. Offered to prove it. Said he'd been at work all week and could send calendar confirmations. She believed him. She still isn't certain whether she should have. She threw the plant away and told herself it was a neighbor being friendly or a mix-up with an address. Saturday came. Carter arrived. The day started the same as the first. Lunch, a walk, easy, comfortable conversation. Then, about an hour into the walk, Carter said something that stopped Nina mid-step. He made a reference to her apartment building, specifically to the fact that the elevator in her building was slow and the stairs were faster. Nina had never told him which stairwell was faster. She had never discussed the elevator at all. He had not been inside her building. He had picked her up at the front entrance both times and dropped her at the same. She asked him how he knew about the elevator. He looked at her. A pause she described as lasting less than a second but feeling much longer. He said she must have mentioned it. She said she hadn't. He said she probably just didn't remember saying it. She let it go. But she told me later that the moment he said, "You probably just don't remember," something in her chest tightened and didn't release for the rest of the day. That evening after dinner, Carter went to use the restroom, and Nina sat at the table alone and thought about the plant, the elevator, the 4 hours between their cities. She thought about how much she had shared over 3 weeks of daily texting and late phone calls. Her neighborhood, her building, her schedule, her routines. The coffee shop on the corner she went to every morning. The gym she used on weekday evenings. She had given someone she barely knew a detailed map of her life. When Carter came back to the table, Nina told him she wasn't feeling well and needed to end the night early. He was understanding. Walked her home, hugged her at the door, said he hoped she felt better. She went inside and locked every lock. She called me immediately and told me all of it. The plant, the elevator. The pause before he said she must have mentioned it. I asked her what she wanted to do. She said she wanted to know if he had actually been to her city before Saturday. She checked her building's front door camera. Her building had a basic security system with a camera over the front entrance. She contacted the building manager and asked if she could see footage from Thursday, the day the plant appeared. The building manager pulled it. At 4:17 in the afternoon on Thursday, Carter walked up to her building entrance, set the plant on the step, and left. He had been in her city 4 days before he was supposed to arrive. He had told her he hadn't. Nina sent him one text, said she knew he had been there Thursday, said she wouldn't be seeing him again, said she would be saving the footage. He didn't respond for 6 hours. When he did, the message was long, apologetic, elaborate. He said he had driven down Thursday on impulse and lost his nerve to call her, and just wanted to leave something to make her smile. He said he should have told her, and he understood why it was upsetting. He said he was sorry. Nina read the message twice and did not respond. She sent the footage and a full account to 2 friends and her sister. She also sent everything to a contact at her company's HR department because Carter worked in the same industry and she wanted a record somewhere official. He texted 3 more times over the following week. Each one measured, calm, apologetic. She did not respond to any of them. The thing Nina told me that I keep thinking about is what she said about the phone calls. She said that somewhere in the back of her mind, during those late-night conversations, she had been aware that she was sharing a lot, but it felt reciprocal. He was sharing too. That's how it works when someone is doing it intentionally. They give you enough to make you feel the exchange is even. Enough to make you feel safe going further. She wasn't sharing with someone who liked her. She was answering questions. I'm going to tell you mine. I'm 36. I live alone in a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest. I have 2 close friends, a job I like, and what I describe as a reasonably healthy relationship with my own judgment. I met a man named Joel through a mutual friend at a birthday party. Not an app, not online. A real introduction in person with a person I trusted standing right there. He was tall, quiet, in a way that read as thoughtful rather than awkward, and he made me laugh twice in the first 10 minutes with observations that weren't trying too hard. My friend had known him for 4 years. He was, by all available information, a real person with a real history and real people who vouched for him. We exchanged numbers that night and made loose plans to get dinner. Dinner was 2 Saturdays later. Italian place I'd been to before and suggested. Easy, familiar, low stakes. We talked for 3 hours. He was a good listener. He asked good questions. He had stories that were interesting without being performances. I drove home thinking this might be something. Over the following 2 weeks, we texted regularly. He was warm but not overwhelming. He didn't text at odd hours. He didn't double text. He was, by every observable standard, appropriate. The second date was at a bar near my neighborhood. His suggestion, though he said he didn't know the area well and let me pick the specific place. I picked a spot I went to semi-regularly, comfortable, familiar. We were there maybe 40 minutes when he said something that my brain flagged, and I immediately tried to unflag. He referenced a coffee order, not in a general way, my specific coffee order. The exact drink I got every morning from the place near my apartment. I had never mentioned my coffee order to him. I had never mentioned which coffee shop I went to. I was certain of this because I'm particular about that place and I would remember bringing it up. I said, "How did you know that's what I drink?" He smiled and said, "You mentioned it." I said, "I don't think I did." He said, "At the party maybe, or in a text. You probably just don't remember. You probably just don't remember." Same phrase Nina's person used. I didn't know that then. I know it now and it makes my skin go cold. I said maybe and moved on. But I spent the next 20 minutes only partially present in the conversation. The other part of my brain was running through every interaction we'd had looking for when I could have mentioned that coffee order. I hadn't. At the end of the night, I said I needed to get up early and wrapped things up. He was easy about it. Walked me to my car, said he'd had a good time, said he'd be in touch. I drove home and called my friend who'd introduced us. I told her about the coffee order. She went quiet for a moment and then said, "That's weird." I said, "It's probably nothing." She said, "Then why are you calling me at 11 at night about it?" She had a point. I thought about it after I hung up. The coffee order was specific. It wasn't something you guess. It wasn't a common order. He knew it. He attributed it to something I'd said. And when I pushed back, he suggested my memory was the problem. The next morning, I went to my coffee shop at my usual time. I sat with my drink and looked around. And I thought about how easy it would be to find out what someone ordered if you knew where they went every morning and you arrived before them and watched. That thought sat in my chest like a stone. I texted Joel that afternoon and said I'd had a good time but wasn't feeling a connection and wished him well. He responded with minutes. Warm, understanding, no problem, hope you find what you're looking for. Perfect response. I sent his name, his number, his photo and everything I knew about him to my friend and my sister that same day. I also changed my routine for the next 3 weeks. Different coffee shop, different time, different route to work. I don't know if I was overreacting. I know that he knew my coffee order and I never told him. I know that when I questioned it, he told me I probably just didn't remember. I know that the second date is when you find out who someone actually is, when the performance of the first date starts to slip. And I know that a perfect response to being cut off is not the response of someone who genuinely didn't see it coming. It's the response of someone who's had practice. 3 first dates that felt like something real. 3 second dates where something slipped. A 2-second expression behind a perfect face. A plan on a doorstep 4 days early. A coffee order he had no way of knowing. Small things. Each one easy to explain. Each one easier to dismiss than to sit with. But here's what all 3 of these stories have in common. The person who did it was not chaotic, not obviously threatening, not the kind of person you'd look at and feel immediate danger from. That is exactly why they were dangerous. Patience is a tool, warmth is a strategy, and the perfect response to being cut off is a practiced one. If something on a second date feels wrong, you do not owe anyone a third. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt when your own instincts are telling you something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. Trust the feeling that makes you pull over 3 blocks from the restaurant and call your friend. Trust the feeling that makes you look around the coffee shop and wonder. If these stories are sitting with you right now, that's your instincts doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Drop a comment. Tell me which one you felt in your chest. And if you've been here for a while, you know what I'm going to say next. Subscribe. New files every week, no filler. Just the stories that stay with you. I'm Mr. Nightmare Files. Trust the small feeling. I'll see you in the next one.